I stood there looking at Caleb, waiting for him to deny his brother's words. But the coward couldn't even look me in my face. This whole time it had been him who had murdered my brother. It had been him who had pulled the trigger. "Say something," I yelled at him, at his back. My voice cracked on the tears that were rushing their way up to the surface. "Say something!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. But he just stood there staring down at the body of his brother, with his fist balled up at his side. I know he was probably going through some form of shock, because it just registered to him that he had just slain his little brother. And I was trying to tell myself to be understanding about it, but I felt betrayed in a major way. I felt lied to. I felt like he didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. We are all victims of this tragedy, but he tried to have his cake and eat it too. It's tragic that my brother killed his best friend and his children. It's tragic that Caleb then killed my brother. What is not alright is for him to lie to me because he decided he wanted the little sister of the man he killed. At last, that's the last tragedy. He does not get to have me. It's not alright. I opened my mouth to yell at him again, but right then Tiny jumped out of the truck, drawing both of our attention. He held his phone in his hand.
"Caleb, man, we gotta go. They just rushed Monica's grandmother to the hospital."
Dear Yah, no. For a moment, my mind fractured as my world tilted. The only thing I could do was reach out. Caleb was there before I even realized he was supporting me. He helped me to get in the car, and as soon as the door closed, he was on his phone. The man with the bulletproof vest shirt floored the gas, causing the tires to screech. As we drove past Rashid's body, Caleb's gaze went to him. The muscle ticked furiously in his chin, and he moved his leg in a restless way, as if it took everything in him to leave him laying there. At the same time, he listened to G with listless eyes. He began to rub his hand over his head in a way I had only seen him do when he was physically and emotionally tired. It looked as if he was getting ready to break down. "What's he saying?" I asked him, trying to get him to say something. He just listened, and that concerned me. He moved as if he was trying to hold on to his rage or grief. I prayed it was because he just left his little brother dead in the street and not because G was telling him anything bad about Nana. "Is she alright?" I clutched at the front of his shirt, trying to get his attention, desperate for any information he could give me. His gaze came to me, and that muscle in his cheek started ticking out of control. Whatever G was telling him, it wasn't good. "Tell me!" I yelled at him. He hung up the phone, and for a moment it looked as if he was going to try not to tell me. "Tell me, coward!" I yelled, and then I slapped him with everything I had in me. He was having a hard time, but I didn't care. Frustratingly, he ran his hand across his face. I raised my hand to hit him again, but he caught it.
"She had a heart attack."
His voice cracked. There were tears in his eyes. Pain. I stared at him confused. Did he say I was having a heart attack? Or that my Nana had a heart attack? Surely it's me, because my heart hurt. It felt like I just got hit in the stomach with a bat. I blinked. Slowly, I sat back in my seat facing front. The man with the bulletproof vest on was driving very fast and reckless, but it didn't matter to me. I blinked. I could not escape into the haze that seemed to settle in on me. I needed answers. I looked back at Caleb. He watched me with concerned eyes. Is she alright?" I whispered. A look of compressed pain settled on his face. I had never seen him this way. Maybe it was me who was dying. Tell me, I said just as quietly. He shook his head.
She didn't make it, baby.
Rage. You're lying! I yelled at him at the top of my lungs. Before I hit him again, I wanted to kill him. You are such a liar! I continued to swing. He caught my arms and pulled me close, but I broke away from him. No, don't touch me! You are a liar! I don't believe you. You are such a liar. Take me to the hospital. He was lying. Just like he had lied about Man. That's what he was, a liar. And now he tried to lie to me and tell me that my nana was dead. There was no way that was true. There was no way y'all would do that to me. No way. I didn't speak to anyone when we got to the helicopter. I just got in and I waited impatiently for them to pull off. The whole ride there, I didn't say nothing because the only thing I could do was call on y'all's name over and over again in my head. You see, I was slipping and I was falling to a place that was scary. It was dark and it was lonely and it was calling me. And calling on the name of Yah was the only thing keeping that place from sucking me in. There was no way my nana was dead. No way. The chopper landed on the roof of the hospital. As soon as we walked into the emergency room, I saw Shlomo hugging a weeping Stormy. In her arms was Eve, who was also crying. My knees gave out. But before I could hit the ground, Caleb caught me, lifting me up.
No, I won't let you fall, baby. I promise. Lean on me. I know you don't want to, but my strength is yours.
He whispered in my ear as he lifted me in his arms. He carried me the rest of the way to Stormy and Shlomo, but I pushed out his arms. Oh dear Yah, my nana was dead. Stormy wouldn't lie. My world shifted. It was too much. I was on an overload and I could not relate to my environment. Stormy reached for me, but I had to see for my own eyes. Eve held out her arms for me. She was afraid. I took her in my arms and I held her close, trying to give her what I had left. Where is she? I cried. Stormy took my hand and led me to a small room. And laying there in the bed was Nana. And I could tell she was gone by the slack in her mouth. No, y'all wouldn't do this to me, I said to Stormy, clutching at her hands, needing support, cause I was falling. Shlomo took a screaming Eve out my arms, while Caleb lifted me up in his again. He wouldn't do this to me, I told him. Ain't I his servant? I asked him. There were tears coming from his eyes.
Yes, baby, you are.
His words were barely legible. Why he do this then? I asked him. I needed him to tell me something. I was confused. I was lost. Why would y'all take her from me? With hands that shook, I reached for my nana, and my soul cried out when I felt how cold they were. These couldn't be my nana's hands. These couldn't be the same hands that mended my tutus or fixed my ballet shoes. I looked down at the hands through blurry vision. They looked like the same hands. They looked like the same hands that rubbed my head when I cried. I lifted her hand and put it on my head, but it just fell off. No, Nana, I wailed. Please, Nana, don't go. Come back, please. Please. Please, Nana, please. My tears were now flowing freely. I laid my head on her chest and I held on tight, determined to hold on to her for as long as I could. I tried to remember the last time we hugged, or the last time I told her I loved her.
She kept pushing me away. She didn't want me to touch her. That was the unbearable pain. But hearing her mourn like this, not being able to comfort her, was ripping out my heart. She wept from the pit of her being, and it was tearing me apart. This was all my fault. I can't lose her. I can't lose Monica. I searched my brain trying to think of a way to fix this. Dear Yah, I can't lose her. Please, Father, help me, cause I couldn't think my way through this. Every time I tried, my thoughts centered back on my brother, Rashid. Rashid was dead. Tonight, I killed my brother, my baby brother. How did I begin to deal with that? I looked down at Monica's back from where she laid her head on Nana's chest. I felt like the most selfish human being on the planet because I needed her right now more than I ever needed anybody in my life. I needed her to open her arms for me. I needed her to rub my head the way she sometimes did and tell me how strong she thought I was and how capable she believed me to be. Whenever she does that, it made me feel powerful. It made me feel as if I could overcome any obstacle. She was my other half. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I needed her to let me comfort her. And she comforted me. I rubbed my hands over my head. Tonight, I killed Rashid. And now I was getting ready to lose my wife, my peace. How did I even begin to deal with that? I needed to fix this. But for the life of me, I didn't know how. For the first time, I didn't know how to fix something and I couldn't relate. I had to bury my hands underneath my arms to keep from grabbing her and comforting her. She needed to say goodbye to her grandmother, but I was not made to see her suffer this way and just stand idly by. I felt like a complete waste of space. As if Shlomo could sense the turmoil I was in, he handed me Eve. She wrapped her little arms around my neck so tight, and I just closed my eyes, taking comfort in that, assuring myself that all I did was for her. It was all for her. And y'all know if I had it all to do again, I would in a heartbeat. She is mine, just like her mother is. And it's my job to protect them from everything and everybody, including my brother. I wrapped my arms around her and I buried my face in her little shoulder. Dear Yah, I killed my brother. Painful tears came from my eyes. I killed Rashid and I just left his body laying there in the street. Tiny put his big paw on my shoulder and pulled me close. It's alright, boss. You did what you had to do. Rashid died a long time ago. He had been taken over by the spirits that ruled him. Remember, he almost killed your wife today. And if Eve had been in that car, boss, she wouldn't have made it. His words were true. But what was I gonna tell my mother? She would not understand. I didn't know how to fix this. Shlomo and Stormy helped me get Monica to my truck that G had drove up to the hospital. She still would not accept my touch. She assured them that she didn't need them to come back to the house with us. We drove back in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I looked through my rearview mirror to my daughter who was asleep in her car seat. She was depending on me to fix what was broken, but her daddy didn't know how. Gideon assured me that he and his men would make sure Rashid and his friends' bodies got back to the States. I still needed to go to my mother and break the news to her. However, it was a good chance she already knew, because she had not stopped calling my phone since we landed on the roof at the hospital. I had to put the ringer on vibrate, just so that I could deal with the present situation at hand. It's the only thing I was able to do. Just try and deal with the present situation at hand. I had messed up everything. This was all my fault. And my mind was too exhausted to think through it. When we pulled up to the boarding house, I put the car in park, and I reached up to turn the key off, but Monica touched my hand, stopping me. I bit down on my teeth. Here it is. I knew it was coming. I told myself to respect her wishes, It was the least I could do for ruining her life. But my heart accelerated, sending panic signals to my brain. I could not lose Monica.
Don't turn the key off,
she said in a quiet voice. I took my hand away from the key and I turned to look at her. She sat staring straight ahead. There was a look of resolve on her face. You don't need to be alone, I began, but she spoke, cutting me off and ending my world.
I want a divorce.
Those 4 words. I rubbed my hands over my face and head as I fought to hold on to my sanity, but I was losing the battle. You see, I had the might to force her to stay with me. I had the power to force her. But what would that help? It will only make things worse. I knew I had to walk away, but everything in me raged at that idea. She got out the car and I opened my door and I jumped out, getting ready to stop her, but instead I clutched the frame of the door for dear life and I watched as she took Eve out of her car seat. My face balled up in rage as my insides screamed at me, calling me a weak bastard for allowing her to walk away from me. I couldn't say anything, because if I opened my mouth, threatening words were going to come out. I closed my eyes as she walked away from me without looking back. I can't. I wanted to kill somebody. I balled up my fist and I got back in my car, slamming the door. I wanted to kill. I needed to release. I lashed out at the nearest thing to me, which was the steering wheel. It felt amazing. I proceeded to pound the shit out of it, needing that release. And when I was done, although it was the most painful thing I ever had to do, I put my car in drive and I drove away from my heart. The next few hours, although painful, paled in comparison. When I pulled up to my mother's house, she stormed out in her robe. Her face was contorted in her grief and rage. "How could you?" she yelled. By this point, I felt numb. I had killed my brother, lost my family. It was only right that this would happen next. "He was your brother!" she yelled as she pounded on my chest. I didn't try to stop her. I know she needed this outlet, just like I had pounded that steering wheel a minute ago. When she was done, she let me hold her and comfort her. She even tried to comfort me, but there was no comfort for me. I would have to make it through this, just like I made it through my painful life, alone. I sat with her until she fell asleep. Still feeling numb, I let myself out of her house and drove to my penthouse. I hadn't been here in so long it felt strange. It didn't feel like home anymore. Home had become the boarding house that was filled with Eve and Monica's laughter. It was filled with Nana's wisecracks and news reportings. Every day when I came in from work, she had a new end-time event to share with me.
"Caleb, do you know the police had to shoot a man for eating another man's face?"
She shook her head.
"Child, we living in the last days."
I settled back on the couch as Eve crawled all over me because she was excited that I was home. Monica would be in the kitchen finishing up dinner, causing the house to be filled with mouth-watering smells. "Yeah, Nana, you might be right," I would always tell her as I settled back relaxing on the couch.
"I know I'm right. Them folks say the sun doing some strange stuff. You mark my words. One of them flares gonna hit us. You wait and see."
By this time, Monica would have handed me a beer. I'd crack it open and take a deep, long swig. The perfect ending to a long day. "Yep, you might be right," I tell her. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jacobs," the doorman said as he held the door open for me. I was too exhausted to speak. I just nodded. How did I get back to this? I was back to this cold and sterile greeting. A far cry from the greeting I had grown used to. As I rode up the elevator, I reflected on the fact that losing my place had been just another lie I had told Monica. I laughed with no humor. How can I lose a place in a building that I owned? Well, there you have it, folks. That's how I ended up back into this cold, lonely place. Lies. Our relationship had been made up of many lies. After showering, I opted out of laying in my bed. There was no way I would get any sleep without the feel of my wife's warm body next to me. And I needed rest so that my brain could be rejuvenated, so that I could figure a way through all this mess that I created. Instead, I settled back in a chair in my living room. It had an amazing view of the lake, a view that I would trade in a heartbeat for those old walls that Nana had decorated with velveteen paintings. My body slipped into sleep out of pure exhaustion. Rashid's last word haunted my dreams. You don't get to live happily ever after, bruh. In my dream, I experienced the pain of killing him all over again. When I was startled awake some hours later, my heart was filled with pain when my lonely apartment came into focus. However, the one good thing about waking up in my present day reality was that the gears in my brain had rested enough to begin working again. First thing I did was pick up the phone to call Monica. I wasn't surprised when she didn't answer, so I shot her a text. Hey baby, I know you're hurt and you need to grieve the loss of Nana. I can't begin to explain to you how your pain is ripping me apart. If I could, I would take it away from you and carry it all on my shoulders. But I can't. What you shared with Nana is yours alone, but what I can do, I will. Don't worry about funeral arrangements. I will take care of everything. You just take all the time you need to grieve. I will give you space. You don't have to worry about me. But what I cannot give you is a divorce. If you don't want to see me for the next few days or months or years, so be it. But I can't give you a divorce, because without you, there is no me. I love you. If you need me to take Eve sometime so that you can be alone, I can come pick her up whenever you want and drop her off whenever you want. You just let me know. And whatever you do, please remember that you're my heartbeat and I can't make it without you. I love you. She texted right back.
You can get Eve from Stormy and bring her back to Stormy. I don't want to see you.
I settled back in my chair. That was the beginning. That I could deal with. It was the divorce thing that I could not. I did not linger long. I had 2 funerals to arrange. Over the next week, I threw myself into getting everything in order. It was not easy. My mother fluctuated in her feelings towards me. Some days she wanted to hold me close, and others she didn't want to see me. All the people that mattered knew the truth about what happened that night in Havana. However, word on the street was that Rashid and his friends went there to settle some beef they had with the Cubans and got killed in the process. But his crew felt better about his death because word on the street was that Dominique also got killed in the process. Without having any real facts, they showed up to the funeral with their heads held high, wearing t-shirts with Rashid's picture on them. Because to them, he was a hero and would go down in the Street Hall of Fame as one of the best to ever play the game. I stood there next to my mother and shook my head when they started chanting his name. But when I saw that it only upset her more, I looked at Teeny, giving him the cue to break it up. My men silently left from where they were standing against the wall, and in a matter of seconds brought silence to these misguided youth. And as tough as that situation was to get through, Nana's funeral was worse. Monica was not handling it well. When it got to the portion of the funeral where friends and family said their last goodbyes to the deceased, she laid her head on Nana's chest and refused to move. Her wails filled the funeral home, breaking my heart. I had respect to her wishes and gave her space. So I stood in the back of the room with my men, holding Eve, so that she didn't have to see me. However, I could not stand there and do nothing when her sounds of pain flooded my system like that. I walked to the front of the room and I handed Eve to Stormy, who stood there rubbing Monica's back trying to comfort her. Then I scooped my wife up in my arms and I carried her out of the room. Thank Yah, she didn't fight me. She just laid her head on my shoulder and let me hold her while she wept. The toughest part was having her once again push away from me when that wave of pain had passed.
After Nana's funeral, I didn't want to see anybody but Stormy. She was truly my soul sister. She understood exactly what I was going through. I'll never forget the day she took me out for ice cream after her grandmother, who had also took care of her most of her life, had died. That day she explained to me how she had to go away to school and try to build a new life. At the time, I didn't understand why she had to leave, but she said she had to because although her grandmother was gone, she still needed to live life. Little Miss Rhonda have taken over your dance class. She told me to tell you not to worry, she will have the girls ready for the show tomorrow, Stormy said as she walked through my house opening curtains. I lay on the couch under my covers. Eve was perched on my legs. She had a box of animal crackers and a remote control in her hand. I chuckled without any humor because she had her little finger on the volume button and was turning it up so that she could hear her Sesame Street over Stormy. Goodness, she was tripping. But I assured them that their teacher will be there to show some support because she knows how hard they work and would not leave them to do the show alone. I grunted. I wasn't going back. Thank you, ma'am, she said, taking the remote out of Eve's hand, who had turned the volume up very loud, completely drowning out her voice. Eve opened her mouth to whine, but Stormy gave her a look and she thought better of it. Now, what was I saying before I was so rudely interrupted? She continued, giving Eve the side eye as she turned the volume back down to a reasonable level and set the remote on the table away from her little fingers. She had brought a bag of groceries and was heading into the kitchen to put them up. You are going to be ready for the show, right? Her face brightened. And guess what? She placed the bag on the floor by the kitchen door and came back into the living room, sitting in Nana's chair. That kind of bothered me a bit, but I didn't say nothing. I kind of just wished she would take Eve's bag that I had packed and had sitting at the door and just leave. She was dropping her off at Caleb's shop for me. Madam Queen is going to dedicate the whole show to Imana Omi. Isn't that great? I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Yeah, that is. Tell her thank you for me. My voice was muffled because I didn't bother lifting my head to talk around the covers. I will not. You're going to thank her yourself when you come to the show. I rolled my eyes. I'm not going, Storm. She exhaled, getting up out of Nana's chair and coming to sit on the couch with me, forcing me to have to sit up and reposition Eve on my legs to make room for her. It's been 2 weeks, Mom. It's time for you to get up. I exhaled, letting my head drop back on my neck. It felt too heavy to hold up. You have to rebuild your life, she said, pulling my shoulders, causing my head to jerk back up. No matter how much you may want to, you can't live in limbo. Tears flooded my eyes because my vision became blurry. I don't know how. I shrugged. I've been taking care of Nana so long. I don't know what to do now that she's gone. I know, baby. She shook her head. Y'all knows I understand what you're talking about. When my grandma died, I wanted to just lay in the bed and never get out. But unlike you, now she was giving me the side eye. I didn't have a husband somewhere paying my bills. I had to get up the next day and try to march forward. Your life is a mess. I ain't gonna lie. But I tell you where you can start. You can get up off this couch and show some support for your girls. They've worked hard all summer and they need their teacher there. She let go of my shoulders. And then after that, take it one day at a time. Have faith in Yah. When things happen to us like this, it tests our faith. It does. But believe your way through it. I promise you troubles don't last always. And for Yah servants, even less. I grinned one-sidedly. You may not have had a husband somewhere paying your bills, but if my memory serves correct, you had a very rich boyfriend who picked up the steak. She grinned. Not at the time, and I told you, for y'all servants, troubles don't last always. Now, I'm gonna put up these groceries, and then I'm gonna take Eve to her dad's. Lay here tonight, but then get up tomorrow. And when you get up, stay up. After Stormy and Eve left, I lay there and I cried some more. Stormy said I had to rebuild my life without my nana. But that thought was terrifying. For the last 2 weeks, I've gotten up forgetting my grandmother was gone, and I put on her coffee,
only to stand there staring at her empty chair and her empty mug. I didn't have to make coffee anymore. When that reality first washed over me, I went down to my knees on the kitchen floor and I cried till my throat hurt. Every night since she's died, I slept in her bed because it still held her scent. I stood in her closet and I buried my nose in her clothes, desperate to hold on to her diminishing essence. Each day, more of her faded away. Later that night, my phone vibrated on the table. I picked it up and saw that I had a couple messages from Caleb. For just a moment, I closed my eyes and I fought my need for him. There is nothing more on earth I want more than to crawl up in his arms so that he could hold me close and tell me that everything will be okay. But at last, that was not the path for him and I. I clicked the button on to read the message. It was a picture of him sitting on the couch with Eve in his lap.
They were both waving at the camera. "We miss you, Mommy, and we love you," was written underneath. I let the phone fall from my fingers to the floor. He texts me all the time. In the mornings, he texts good morning. In the afternoon, he texts a picture of his bland lunch and then will say how much he missed our lunch dates. At night, he texts a picture of his chair that he had taken a sleeping in because he couldn't sleep in his bed without me. I never text anything back. Another thing I have found out the Joker lied to me about. He still owned his penthouse. Hell, I found out he owned the whole damn building. I shook my head. But one thing I could never forgive him for was lying to me about Man. Never. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up the next day, it took everything I had in me to pull myself off the couch. Nana would want me to go to the show and support the girls. At one point in time, the center had been her whole life. I couldn't drop the ball now. I had to continue her work. After showering, I went to my Nana's closet and I pulled out her old costume. It was a black dress she had worn to dance the final scene in the production Black Swan, a tragedy. It fit my mood perfectly. I pulled my locks back into a tight ponytail, giving myself a very severe look. I had become the Black Swan. Madame Queen hurried the next act out to the stage. She had a feeling that this would be the show that put her on the map. This would be the show that she would always be remembered for. As the show had done the previous season before, it had completely sold out. There wasn't even standing room left. She had everyone from thugs on the street to news reporters in the audience. This was going to be the night everyone would remember. For the 100th time, her eyes went to the beautiful young lady that sat off to the side where Stormy had deposited her on the stage steps. Strapped to her back was a beautiful cream guitar. What kept drawing her attention to the little poor soul was how much she reminded her of her sweet tart. Both of them wore their sadness like badges. "Cupcake," she said, catching Stormy, who rushed past her, shushing the children. "A moment of your time, please." Looking completely harassed and as stressed out as Madam Queen felt, Stormy stopped to see what she wanted. "Dear, it's okay to be stressed, but it's never okay to show it. You're too beautiful for that, she admonished her pupil. Stormy exhaled, letting her head fall back on her shoulders, obviously in no mood for advice from the madame. Who is that? Madame cooed, pointing to the young lady with her red French fan. Stormy turned her head to see who it was she was pointing to. Backstage was a very crowded space. Who? She asked. The beautiful creature with the long brown braids over there. Stormy nodded with recognition. Oh, that's Anataya, the daughter of my very good friends. I just brought her here because she needed to get out of her room. She was beginning to make her parents worry. Is she in your way? I have her sitting there because there's no room out front. She's so sad, isn't she? Kind of reminds me of Sweetheart, doesn't she? Madam said instead of answering questions. There was something coming together in her head. She was getting a hunch about the young lady, and she didn't make it this far in her career without following her hunches. Yeah, she is. Just like Monica, she lost a couple people that was very close to her. Stormy went to walk away. Tell me, Cupcake, can she play that guitar on her back? Madam asked, stopping her again. This time, when Stormy turned to face her, there was a bright smile on her face. Oh, Madam, her voice is like... it's like nothing I can explain with words. It is said that her singing attracts angels. That would be just wonderful if you had room for her in your show. Maybe if she performs, she will feel better. Madame snapped her fan closed. Come, Cupcake, introduce us. Anataya sat on the stairs, angry her parents had forced her to come tonight. She didn't mean to have an attitude with Stormy, but she just wished she would have never run this idea by her mother. She didn't want to be here tonight around all these people. She didn't want to be anywhere he wasn't. Monroe. Just the thought of his name brought tears to her eyes. He and Dawid were gone, and her dad and Gideon wasn't even trying to look for them. Hey, Ty. She looked up when Stormy called her name, and then blushed when she saw that she had somehow garnered the attention of Madame Queen, who was famous in the hood for her flamboyancy. She stood to her feet and dusted off her pants as she walked over to the two women. Ty, this is Madame Queen. Madam, this is Anataya. Nice to meet, Ty began, but Madam cut her off. Why are you so sad, Biscuit? Ty was surprised at the woman's question. I don't know what you mean. Madam hit her arm playfully with her fan. It's okay. You don't have to tell me. But a talented girl like yourself, I bet you wrote a song about it, huh? Instantly, Ty thought about the song she had been working on since the night her brother and Monroe walked out of the gym doors. She nodded. Suddenly, the need to sing began to burn her soul. Yeah, I did. Madam's eyes grew wide with her lust for the performance. If I told you I can give you an opportunity tonight to show us all how you feel with your beautiful voice, would you accept it? Ty didn't have to think about it. The need to sing had taken over her to the point that it left her breathless. Yeah, I would. Perfect, Madam cooed. Come with me, Biscuit. Stormy wrapped her arms around the girl's shoulders as they followed behind Madame, who glided across the floor to where Monica stood, giving her girls a final pep talk before their performance. Sweetheart, can I have a word with you? Monica turned her head to look at her for only a second. Not now, Madam. I have to get the girls ready for their performance. They're up next. Well, I'll only need a moment of your time, dear. Monica exhaled, knowing that there was no use ignoring Madam. It was an impossible mission. I'll be right back, she told her girls. Try to relax. You guys are going to do great. Sweetheart, meet Biscuit. Biscuit, Sweetheart. For a moment, Monica and Anataya was at a loss at what to do or say. What she meant to say, Stormy said, coming to stand between the two girls. She picked up both of their hands. Is Monica meet Anataya. Anataya meet Monica. The two young women that were very close in age looked into each other's eyes, and they saw their sadness reflected in the other as if a mirror. Sweetheart, Biscuit here is going to provide the music for your closing performance. Oh, madam, about that, Monica began, but madam cut her right off. No, dear. There is no about that. Surely you won't open your lips to tell me you're thinking about not doing it. As she talked, her voice began to rise as she prepared herself to have one of the grand fits she was legendary for. Monica, who didn't have the will nor the energy to try and talk her down off the ledge, grabbed her hand. Of course not, madam. I was just gonna say that Anataya and I have not practiced anything, so it may be a bit awkward trying to perform on the fly like that. A huge smile came across madam's face. Oh, sweetheart. The greatest events that happened in showbiz history happened by happenstance. This is going to be the most majestic performance that ever hit the stage. You mark my words. Be ready. You two are up after your little ballerinas. Toodles. And then she turned and sailed away, leaving Stormy to work out the kinks. Stormy, who still held both of their hands in her palms, brought them both to rest just above her heart. I think what she saw in you two is that you both share a common sadness, and just maybe you can come together and express that on stage. After giving their hands one last squeeze, she told them both she loved them and then rushed off to try and regain order to the little ones that was overexcited to be backstage and was running to and fro. Feeling like two fish out of water, Monica and Ty both smiled, but neither of their smiles reached their eyes. I'm sorry they put you on the spot like this. I guess we can just go out there and wing it, huh? Ty shook her head. They didn't put me on the spot. Sometimes I feel like all I can do is sing. It's the one beautiful thing I have left. Monica swallowed as she looked at her. Their sadness very much mirrored the other. She reached out and took Ty's hand, and for a moment they just stared at the other. Both of their eyes filled with tears that didn't drop. It was as if in that moment they silently shared their stories with each other. Monica nodded. Okay, she said before she turned to prepare her girls to go out on stage. Neither Ty nor Monica knew that this night would seal their fate. And although it would be a while before either of them saw each other after tonight, they would eventually become the best of friends. Together, Ty and I walked out on stage. Someone had placed a stool and a microphone up front. We walked out to a standing ovation. When the audience quieted down and settled back into their seats, I approached the mic. Ty smiled encouragingly at me. The show tonight was dedicated to my grandmother. I spoke into the mic. She would have loved this. I just want to thank you all for coming out and to say, right then the auditorium door opened, casting a little light in a dark space. My words stalled when I saw who it was. Caleb. I hadn't seen him since my nana's funeral. The sight of him took my breath. He was so handsome and so strong. He carried Eve on one of his strong arms. She clung to her daddy's neck, a luxury no longer allowed to me. I forced my gaze away from him, putting it back on the audience. They all looked up at me with such expectation. They wanted to be entertained, but I had nothing left in me to give but pain. I just wanted to say, I continued, that this will be my last dance. I felt Anataya grab my hand. I squeezed hers before slowly walking to take my spot center stage. I had become the Black Swan. As if on cue, everything went dark before 2 spotlights shined down on us. I stood in the center of the stage and I closed my eyes as my pain washed over me. I let it have me completely. And with it came anger. Anger that my life had been made such a, I call this piece tragedy. And Ataya said into the mic. My eyes drifted open. It was as if she was in my head. But she wasn't. She sat on her stool in front of the mic with her guitar in her arms. Her fingers began to strum her instrument in a beautifully haunting tune that sung instantly to my soul, filled the darkness. My eyes drifted closed and I began to sway to the tune. I gently moved my neck and shoulders, embodying my tragedy. I thought about Man and who he could have been. I thought about Mika, Ro, Po, and Nay, and who they would never be. I began to move my arms to the tune as my body got more involved in my tragic sway. I thought about Rashid. I thought about Mama Rita who had to bury her child. I thought about Nana. But it was as I was thinking about Caleb that my hands came up to suddenly clutch my wound. And just then, Ataya's voice filled the room. And I was no longer in control of my movements. My body became elegance as I danced to our tragic love story. 2 souls that could never be because life had made a vicious decree. I went up on my toes, causing my body to extend straight out before lifting my legs straight in back of me. Her beautiful voice washed over me and it seemed as if it caused me to dance like I had never danced before. And I guess it's only fitting that if this was my last dance, then it should be the one they remembered me for. I danced for Man. I danced for Mika, Ro, Po, and Nay. I danced for Rashid and Mama Rita. I danced for my Nana. And finally, I danced for me and Caleb's love story. We all shared one thing in common. We had all been weaved into this tragic pattern that had only left pain in its wake. And Ataya's words came to an end at the same time my dance did. And when I opened my eyes, I was amazed to see that I stared at the audience through tears. They all sat staring at us as if in a trance. Breathing heavy, I welcomed the burning journey of my tears as they ran down my face. Madam Queen was the first to snap out of the trance. She stood to her feet and she began to applaud as if she had never seen anything like our performance. There was tears in her eyes. Her applause brought everyone else out of whatever hole the presentation had on them. The whole room stood to their feet, and I was even more amazed to see that many of them had tears in their eyes as well. And Ataya turned to look back at me with a smile on her face. This time, it reached her eyes. I was not surprised to see that she had been crying as she sang. You could hear the pain in her voice. Somehow, she had made us all feel the pain in her voice. I reached for her hand and together we took a bow. Together she and I had made history. Together we had managed to make the world see our tragedy.